All right, welcome everybody. This is sixth lesson, I think. I think there's 2 left. Next week is on walking, and the last is on a little bit with the eyes, seeing. So today's on habits of mind, which I could teach any of these lessons on habits of mind. When I took this teacher training for 4 years, I learned a lot about how I take aim at a movement pattern and want to sort of see if I'm doing it right. That's a habit of mind, right? Or if I'm asking you today, I selected a lesson that is, it's not really challenging, but it, if you extend it pretty far, or too far for yourself, it'll be hard to do what I'm asking you to do. So, I'll drop in some comments about habits of mind throughout, but just from a neuroscience perspective, remember, it's pretty amazing that Moshe Feldenkrais developed this work between the 1920s and the 1960s, 50s, 60s. And pretty much neuroscientists now are understanding that he got almost everything right. And he got it out of studio practice. Now, he was a physicist as well. But what he got right is that we're not machines controlled by our brains. We're interactive both ways, always. So we're always sensing what our body is doing, feeding back to the brain, and then feeding back. So the motor cortex and the premotor cortex deep in the brain are hooked up with all kinds of things like the environment or emotion or thought or sensation. We're not sort of the lab rats of the behaviorist era in the early part of the 20th century. If you want to read some good chapters on Moshe Feldenkrais, I introduced these chapters during my talk in, when was it, December, on Norman Doidge's The Brain That Changes Itself. Or I might be titling that wrong, The Brain That Heals Itself. It's his second book on the brain and neuroplasticity. All right, so let's begin. Stand with your hands just at your side and notice where your feet are first. And are they, and you can look and see, like my left foot is slightly turned out. And in order to turn my left foot out, something has to happen in my hip. So you can maybe feel, if my left foot is turned out, or your right foot is turned out, or something, or turned in, there may be something in your hip that you can actually sense in the pressure of the hip. And then do just a little bit of side bending and feel, when you go to the right or the left, which side is easier to bend toward. And which side goes, I'm not asking you to throw your hips to one side like that. I'm asking you to simply bend in the ribs, tilting the shoulders and the head. And notice, for most of us, one of these sides is quite different than the other. And particularly notice in the upper spine. And now, just stand again. And notice, is one shoulder blade, does it feel like it's hanging differently, forward or behind? You don't have to check this with your hands. You can just sense it. For me, my left shoulder blade is always a little bit forward. And now, just turn yourself a little bit to the right and just a little bit to the left, and notice which of these is easier and which is a little more challenging. And we'll come back to this standing scan at the end of the lesson. So really, sort of in your mind, take note of what's easier and harder. And through the practice of awareness through movement, you begin to understand that, like, I know that this turning to the right is a little easier for me in my spine. In my upper spine, mid to upper spine. And now just lie down on the ground, on your mat, and extend your legs, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable to do that. We'll do a lot with the feet standing here, but just to scan, notice how your shoulders are touching the floor. If we put a marble or a drop of water on your upper chest, which way would it go? Would it roll off to the left or to the right? Open your eyes and notice, if you can, is your nose and are your eyes pointing slightly left, slightly right? Now, because we are oriented to this, however we have used our bodies and oriented ourselves, it feels like you're pointing straight. It may feel like you're pointing straight. But for almost all of us, pointing a little bit to the left or the right. And sometimes we really can't sense that. So does that tilt of the head to the left or the right, is it the same way the marble would roll on the chest, or is it a different way? And notice the pressure of each shoulder onto the floor. And listen, it's not like our bodies all go one way. Like sometimes in my body, I turn to the left in my upper body, but I turn to the right with my hips. I have a little twist in my spine. So now notice which way your hips, at the back of your hips, which side has just a bit more pressure. And now notice the turn of the feet. We've talked about this with the laser beams attached to the toes and which direction each foot is pointing. And if, in fact, one foot is turned out a little more than the other, is that the same direction that you feel the hip pressure? Notice where your spine is touching the floor and where it's coming off the floor. If you're new today, do everything slow, slower than you might think, and do less. And if I ask you to do something like I'm about to ask you to lift your tailbone off the floor with your feet standing, do it and then let it settle back, and then do it again and let it settle back. Unless I ask you to hold it into place. So stand your feet comfortably, bend your knees and stand your feet so that your feet are very comfortable. And check it out. What does comfortable mean for you? Really settle into sensation here. Check into your mind. Are you thinking more about what's right here or more about what's your sensation of comfort? And you have a choice there. You can always go toward comfort. And allow yourself to explore the distance that your feet are apart relative to your hips. Where is comfortable? And now, simply by pressing into the feet, lift only your tailbone, roll it up off the floor by tilting your pelvis toward, we've called this 12 o'clock, but very, very small. Like if your tailbone were actually meeting the floor, and actually the tailbone for most of us, it tilts away from the floor. So you have to really imagine your tailbone, because you're not going to probably get pressure from where your tailbone is. But imagine that, and you can do this again. Let it down and lift and roll it. Again, the pattern here is really rolling it. It's not lifting all of your spine. Roll your tailbone so that you might just slide a piece of paper under it. That's it, and roll it right back down. It's like a curling of the tailbone. Where can you feel, as you roll your tailbone up, can you feel that you could roll each vertebrae from the bottom of your spine separately up? So you can go maybe one more vertebrae there. This lesson, Moshe Feldenkrais called spine like a chain. So if you were to take a metal chain and lie it down on the ground one link at a time, or pick it up off the ground one link at a time, that's the image. So very small segments. Feel when you start to lift one more vertebrae at a time, very slowly, and let it back down one vertebrae at a time. Do you feel areas that feel like they're clumsy or the movement is jagged? Or you don't really have an image, you don't have a sensation of what's happening there. Check in with what you're doing. If you're lifting pretty far, pretty fast, you're probably lifting your whole spine at the bottom and not lifting it, curling it one chain link at a time. And notice, as you go toward your head with your spine, you're going to begin to feel pressure in the upper part of your back. And you might feel a little more pressure on one side than the other. In this lesson, the habit of mind is, can I allow myself the patience to allow these links, each vertebrae, to rise and fall? Or am I skipping through it because I have a goal in mind to get my spine off the floor? Notice that. And let's let this go and lengthen your feet. And now just feel in the bottom of your spine and the middle of your spine, on your back, if anything feels different. Does your breath feel different? So another thing to track when we do this again in a moment is, how is your breath engaging with this action? And probably at some point you're holding your breath or you're straining your breath. Can you do this with the easiest breath? The breath is a track. The breath tracks effort. For one thing, it oxygenates. When the body needs more oxygen, the breath works harder or deeper. But for another thing, it begins to connect with effort as a pattern, as a habit. And so if you want to check in with the habit of mind, listening to your breath and how, whether you're holding it or working it really hard, is a good way to do it. Stand your feet again. one segment at a time. We're going to move even further, but only at the level of comfort. If you get to a place where you feel any pain, as a practice, as a habit of mind, back away, do less. So take your time to understand an image for yourself. How does my spine function like a chain? And for most of us, we are not used to using the small segments of our backs, of our spines, in this way. And on your way back down, toward the ground, reverse the links. So are you actually putting the spine back down on the ground, one vertebrae at a time? Are you engaging your belly muscles a lot, or your leg muscles a lot? This is a very simple action and can be done with almost no effort. It takes some effort to lift your spine. It's a really interior journey on this spine like a chain, because nobody's standing over you saying you're doing it right or wrong, or you're not going far enough. The next time you leave it down, one link at a time, just let your pelvis rest on the floor with your knees standing, with your feet standing and your knees bent. Take a few breaths and listen to the instruction before we do it. I'm going to ask you to go as far as you comfortably can by rolling your spine, one link at a time, off the floor, and then leave it there. Now, leaving it there requires you to be comfortable. It's a position Moshe Feldenkrais says he would like you to be able to stay in this position all day long. So, go ahead. Spine, one link at a time, rolled up off the floor, and then leave your pelvis off the floor. If you begin to tremor in that position, you're doing a little too much. Now, feel the pressure of where your neck and shoulders are. And feel, are you gathering tension there or action in order to hold your spine here? And now slowly, with your spine lifted like this, again, no one's telling you how far you have to go. So you can go less if that's more comfortable. Tilt your legs left and right, both knees together, left and right, with your spine up here. And feel what's happening between the middle of your spine, with your spine, with your pelvis up like this. Feel where your spine is rolling on the floor, that point where it's rolling on the floor, and feel above that. Feel that your head can actually tilt in the direction of your knees as well. So you have your head and your knees moving together. And recognize that what this lesson is asking you to do right now is to tilt throughout your whole spine. The head is on the very top of the spine. And of course, it could twist in the opposite direction. But right now, we're just allowing those knees to influence the head. You can always leave it down whenever you like, but I'm going to ask you to do one more thing, which is leave the head still and let the tilting of the legs pull the head in the direction they go. See if you can influence the head. See if you can feel that action up through your upper spine to actually that the head gets drawn to the left or right. It's a little bit different, isn't it, to feel that from below. Rest with your knees bent like this and your feet standing. Just leave your spine down. Let your pelvis go down, but chain it down one link at a time. Now ask yourself, did I really tax myself with that? Did I try as a habit of mind? Did I try really hard? Do I want to try more or less? What's of interest to you? And now lift the spine like a chain, up again. Keep it off the floor. Draw the knees to the left and the right. Allow the head to be influenced. And do it just a little tiny bit faster. But what does that mean? You figure out what it means in your sensation. Maybe it means to go smaller. Feel what feels comfortable to you and follow that comfort. Okay, now rest, let your pelvis down. One link at a time, let your pelvis down. And now go back to the first thing I asked you to do, which is to tilt your spine and one link at a time. And one vertebrae at a time, tilt it up, go ahead, and see if it's any smoother or different. Or maybe you have more of an image of what your spine is doing there. And then just roll it right back down and rest again. Look for your own sense of ease. This is your lesson. I'm leading it, but only to the, you don't need, we're really taught in our culture to do things right, to be good students. But in this lesson, I'm really encouraging you to follow your own sensation and interest. And definitely to stay away from pain. Tilt your spine up, one link at a time. Hold it where it's comfortable, as far up your spine as is comfortable. Take the palms of your hands, extend your arms directly toward the ceiling and touch your palms together. This is what we call triangle arms. And now direct the tilting of your knees and head by using your arms, left and right. And feel, is one shoulder easier than the other side? So go slow enough that you can really detect it. Become like a sensation detective here. Is there something you're doing in your neck? Keep your spine up off the floor while you're doing this. And that's hard. And now, instead of tilting left and right, keep your hands just as they are, and raise your right shoulder blade off the floor, and your right hand will slide forward toward the ceiling, and then do the opposite, raise your left. And probably you're going to feel different on one side and the other. You don't have to work with your knees on this one. You can if your knees get influenced or your head gets influenced. Remember last week we were banging the shoulder blade off the floor. This is a very similar thing, but I'm not asking you to do it very fast. And I'm asking you to do it with your spine lifted. If you're getting tired, you need to lift your spine less. So now let your arms go down, keep your spine up. And now lower your spine one link at a time. Slow, slow, slow. Lengthen your legs and feel. Is the pressure of your spine different or any clearer on the floor? Is the marble rolling differently or at a different pace? Are your shoulders somehow oriented differently on the floor? Notice your ribs in back. Put your arms up into the triangle arms just from this position and do the lifting again, one side, then the other side, just to check in this position without your spine lifted. Is there one shoulder comes away from the spine, shoulder blade comes away from the spine more easily than the other? Just to notice, not to do anything about it. Let the arms down and rest. And when I'm teaching a class, I can see the changes in students. I can see in the 3 students I have on the floor here today that their orientation of their chest and their shoulders, even their feet, is changing. Or their hips. And you probably feel some of the same things at home. Bend your knees, stand your feet. Slowly lift your spine one vertebrae at a time. And hold it to the highest spot comfortable. And now, this is a strange thing I'm going to ask you to do here. Rock from your head, by using your heels, pushing into the floor. Rock head to tail through your spine. Like rock yourself lengthwise. Figure out how to do that by pushing your heels into the ground or lifting them off the ground with your spine lifted. That's it. And your head, if you allow it, will go in a yes-no motion. If you push your spine up toward your head, your chin can rock as well. So rock back and forth using your heels. Do it just a little bit faster. If you're getting tired, do less. You decide how far you want to go here and what comfort means. And as you're rocking your heels from head to tail, turn your head to your right and keep rocking and notice how this feels. And rock a little faster with your head turned to the right. So that might mean smaller. Are you holding your breath? Rocking from top to bottom. Turn your head to the right or to the left. Is it different? Is the pressure different in the upper part of your spine or in your neck? And finish with a few movements of rocking yourself head to tail with your head facing the ceiling, your eyes facing the ceiling again. Use your heels. Slowly, one link at a time, let your spine lower like a chain to the ground. Let your legs lengthen. Okay, last week, I believe it could have been the week before, I introduced this notion of pushing your belly out when you're breathing. I'm going to ask you to do that in a very specific way now. So stand your feet. Lift your spine one link at a time from the bottom to where as easily you could hold. And now, when you breathe out, this is paradoxical. This is called paradoxical breathing, what I'm going to ask you to do. When you breathe out, push your belly out. It's the wrong way, I'm just telling you. Usually you push your belly out when you breathe in. So each time you breathe out, push your belly out. Really push it out. Not to painfully push it out, but really arch that lower. He's asking you to arch around your belly button and below it when you breathe out. And now just breathe just regularly without pushing the belly out. And let your spine down like a chain. And now, very, very slowly, lift your tailbone and one vertebrae at a time, and see if anything has become clearer or more distinct in your movement of your spine as you move your spine off the floor, one link at a time. Is it becoming smoother, easier, more comfortable, more restful? I can see it's becoming smoother. For all three of you. Jenny's right in front of me, and I can see it's becoming much smoother. And then put it down, one link at a time. And when you go down, lengthen your legs and take a rest. And now, if you want to, here's something that can comfort that lower back. Moshe Feldenkrais sometimes puts this into a lesson to do a little bit of restful work. So you can bend your knees and bring them toward your chest and grab your hands on the top of your knees like Jenny's doing here. And just pull your knees toward your chest and rock side to side. This is done in a lot of yoga practices. It's done, this rocking motion. And your head can just move right along with your whole self. Do that until you're done, and then lengthen your legs. Now, you remember the rocking we did with using the heels. Now I'd like you to do the same sort of rocking top to bottom, but with you simply laying just like this, with your breath soft. Rock the tops of your feet toward your head. You're going to rock on your heels, and do a little faster. Rock yourself using your heels. So you can feel your whole self rocking. You might even go faster, or smaller and faster, just to go get that rocking feeling. It's a little bit jelly-like. Let your breath be soft. A little faster even. So now, let this go. We're going to return to it, but we're going to return to it in a very specific way. When your feet come up, the tops of your feet come up toward your head, breathe in. And when your feet go down, breathe out. So do it more slowly so that it follows your breath. Beautiful. And now, and this gets confusing, do the opposite. So when you bring your feet up, breathe out. When you bring your feet down, breathe in. And now breathe however you'd like, and notice which way supports the movement better. Which pattern of breath. So still have the breath follow the feet, but let your breath just follow however it wants to. There is no right answer to this. I remember in my first couple of years of the Feldenkrais work training, I kept thinking, I must be doing something wrong. That's a habit of mind, right? Or I wish an instructor were here to tell me how to do it right. Also a habit of mind. Rest with your legs extended. Stand your feet. And now we're going to rock, we're going to lift the spine. And let it go back down like a chain. And now you remember the rocking with your spine down, your pelvis down. Rock on your heels. So you're rocking top to bottom, up through your whole self, and feel that rocking motion in your pelvis, in your hip joints. And if you want to feel it, give yourself a little more sensation, you can put your hands in the folds of the top of your legs and right at your hip joints. So you can feel, oh, my pelvis is rocking inside. And do that a little faster and feel, really put your awareness on your hip joints here. Continue rocking and focus on making the movement lighter and smoother. Still with your attention on your pelvis, on your hip joints. Can you be lighter there? Rest with your legs lengthened. Stand your feet, bend your knees. And now we're going to do, we're going to lift that spine like a chain off the floor to where it's comfortable and leave it down. And notice if anything's smoother, different, easier. Can you maintain that sense of lightness in your hip joints as you're doing this? You're pushing through your hip joints into your spine. And do it once with your head turned to the right. The whole up, spine like a chain up, spine like a chain down. And then do it once with your head turned to the left and notice the pressure on your shoulders differently, in your neck, in your upper spine. And then with your head back, looking toward the ceiling. Does anything feel smoother, easier, lighter? Rest with your knees up, feet standing. Take your hands and embrace yourself up high. So your left hand is going to grab your right shoulder blade. And your right hand is going to grab, you don't have to totally grab it if it's not comfortable, but get close. Lift your spine to where it's comfortable. Roll your spine up. And using your arms, rock the top of your torso back and forth. Even in a small way, using your arms, rock your torso back and forth. Well, can your breath be light while you're doing this? And your head can move too, as you're rocking back and forth. Keep rocking and lower your spine like a chain to the ground. And then just rest there for a moment. And then switch your arms, which one's on top and which one's on bottom. Just switch them around. And lift your pelvis. And lift your spine like a chain up to comfort. If it's hard, do less. You're in control of that. And rock your torso left and right. Let your pelvis down, spine like a chain down. Keep rocking. Let your arms go and rest. You can rest with your feet standing and your knees up, or your legs long. Lift your spine like a chain. Stand your feet. Lift your spine like a chain slowly to where it is comfortable, as high as you can, where it's comfortable. Take your palms, put them toward each other in triangle arms. And now right up there, while looking at it, circle your arms in a very small circle as if you were clockwise. And feel the back of your spine rolling in a circle on the floor. Leave your arms up, lower your spine. Like a chain. Raise your pelvis and spine like a chain, and then circle your arms the other way. And feel, where is your spine touching the floor, and how is it circling on the floor, influenced by that motion of the hands and arms. Let your spine down. Keep your knees standing. And then when your spine is down like a chain, let your hands go down. And rest for a moment. If you've lengthened your legs, stand your feet again. Take your arms and put them out like a cross with your palms either up or down. It doesn't really matter on this. Lift your pelvis, spine like a chain, to as high as is comfortable, but one link at a time. And now using your feet, make a clockwise circle wherever your spine is touching the floor. On your spine. So you're going to roll your spine in that one spot, wherever you feel it touching the floor, in a clockwise circle. Take a brief rest, just like this. And roll in the other direction. Is your breath light? Can it be lighter? Can your neck let go and still do this? Let your spine, like a chain, go down again. And let your hands come down at your sides. And now 1 or 2 more times, very, very slowly, roll your tailbone up off the floor and see, is this different than when we started? This chain-like motion. Feel how easy that is? It's simple. But you're gathering a sense that your spine from the mid-back through the tailbone can actually separate itself and move in different areas. And that your upper back and neck have something to do with that movement. And when you're done with 1 or 2 times, lengthen your legs and rest. and feel, sense yourself on the floor now. Those in the class here, you can name it. Do you feel any differently? In your spine, in your back? And I'll tell people what you might say.
It's longer, there's more space between the vertebrae.
More space, longer between the vertebrae. The plane across her chest feels more even, or belly, or chest, yeah. And that's actually visible here. I can see that in her. Slowly roll off to one side. Come to sitting, come to standing, and try not to engage too much breath, or do this really slowly. We're going to reorient the spine now. We're going to come back up to standing. And remember what we did at the first here, which is to side bend. Do it very small and slow and see if anything's different. And you can name what's different if something's different. Anything different? Yeah. What's different?
A little smoother.
A little smoother,
It's easier on both sides.
It's easier on both sides, You're evening out. And do a little bit of turning now. Now, even though our attention was on our spine, the places where the ribs hook into the spine, let me show this on, who's close? Oh, you're closest. Yeah, okay. Can you turn your back to the camera? So the only places where our ribs are attached to our spine are in the back. The front, they're attached to the breastbone, right? So they're sort of hanging and sprung. So if you take your spine like a chain, you're actually allowing your ribs to change their ability to compress and smoothly glide over each other as well. That's why, and your shoulders probably feel a little bit different too, yeah? So the shoulder blades are meant to glide. Shoulder blades, even though we have a hip girdle and a shoulder girdle, we call it a hip girdle and a shoulder girdle, the shoulder blades are very different than the hips. They're not attached to the back. They glide over the spine, over the ribs. They glide. They're not attached. They're attached muscularly and with tendons and so forth. But they're not attached structurally, except through a mechanism through your shoulder. And then they're attached to the collarbone. So really interesting hanging structure. Take a walk around, see if anything feels different walking. And then I'll take some questions, Julia, if there are any questions. And I can also talk a little bit about habits of mind and how to notice them. No questions. Okay. So find yourself near your mat. You can sit, stand, whatever is comfortable. So as you're going through your day, the way to begin to notice your habits of mind is not to try to change them. So here's what happens to me. I am sitting at my computer, and my head comes forward and goes like this. And I start feeling like, oh, God, I'm all tense and tight. This is my particular pattern. And then I get up, and I realize I'm walking around like this with my head forward. I'm accentuating it, but I feel this. And then I try to correct it, but I've learned correcting it doesn't work because it's a habit. But it's both a physical habit and a habit of mind. So the thing that I've learned to do is to simply notice it. Now, at the beginning of noticing things, it might drive you crazy. Because you'll walk around. At the beginning of Feldenkrais training for myself, I started to go, oh my God, so now I know I do these things like this. So you're going to want to fix it. That's also a habit of mind, is trying to fix it. But the only thing that works in your nervous system is not fixing it, but replacing it with something that feels better. There's a difference. Instead of just undoing this, I have to replace it. I have to give it some sense of something that feels better. And for me, it has nothing to do with this neck coming forward. It has to do with feeling my weight in my heels. So next week, like in our walking lesson, I'm going to be talking about learning to pay attention to yourself while walking. We'll be getting up and down and up and down. And in walking or sitting, because we do both of those for long periods of time, you can begin to recognize your habits. Because often your habits will make you tired or sore or even injured. It's your habits that do that. It's typically not your structure. It's typically your habits. And Moshe Feldenkrais would work with athletes all the time, really famous. He worked with Magic Johnson, and he worked with, I don't know, Olympic athletes a lot. And he started to get them to notice why they kept injuring one knee or another knee, or one hip or another hip, or one shoulder or another. And it had to do with how they were using themselves. So you may have had a shoulder injury or a knee injury and have begun a habit of walking with a different foot on one side, being a little bit, I'm limping here, but stiffening. And we'll begin to notice that next week in a walking lesson. We're not going to walk that much. The lesson is not walking. The lesson is a different thing. It's around feeling the pelvis, but then we'll get up and walk and feel the pelvis. So I want to say that again. I want to just repeat what I said, that the noticing of your habits, the tendency, particularly in the Western world where we fix things, is to fix it. It does not work. I work with performers all the time. They go, I went on stage and I tried to fix this breath pattern. Yeah, how'd that go? I was right back to it. Yeah, because you have a habit. You can't act and focus on your habit. You can't act meaningfully or well and focus on your habit. So you need to replace it with something that your body and your nervous system takes up that feels better. You need to establish a different habit. It's the only way, and that is slow. Any questions from here? You guys are good students. You're very quiet and obedient and compliant and because you're kind of on display, right? Thank you. See you next week.